Hi everyone, welcome to the first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing to bring you consumer insights and learnings from recent campaigns that have launched to market. What we'll do week by week is take you through consumer response using the results in our own Zappi platform, and we'll have a bit of a conversation about the kind of learnings and takeaways and how they can be applied to the advertising that you're developing. Just before we dive in, and given it's the first in the series, I think we should probably introduce ourselves. So I'm Kim Malcolm, and I'm head of the advertising solutions here at Zappi. And I'm joined by Isa.
So I'm Isa Franzini. I'm an insights manager at Zappi, and I look at results on or how consumers are responding to advertising, innovation across multiple categories on a daily basis through our Zappi platform to better inform what's going on out there.
Excellent, thanks, Isa. And that's why you're the perfect person to have alongside me for this. So shall we dive in to our first campaign that we've looked at? Great. So this week, what we've done is we've looked at Cadbury's Creme Egg, which is a campaign that's launched in the UK with the slogan that was around many, many years ago around how do you eat yours? Before we get started, shall we quickly play the ad, Isa, so everyone knows which one we're talking about?
Yeah.
The way you eat a cream egg says everything about you. Heather likes to nibble hers whilst maintaining eye contact. That means she's kind of a big deal. She orders for the table.
We'll have the lobster.
Ooh, she's always the better half of a couple's costume.
Giddy up.
Plays rock every time and doesn't care what the lyrics are. Search Cream Egg Test to find out who you really are. How do you eat yours?
Excellent. And it's like a full campaign, isn't it, Isa? So there's not just the video ad. So there's also some out-of-home creative that we can see here, which is completely in keeping, obviously, a nice integrated campaign. But then not just that, I guess we all just saw in the video ad that there's some kind of test. So obviously Isa and I couldn't resist but have a little go at that test. Isa, do you want to reveal what we learned about ourselves from the test?
Absolutely.
So I was a suck out the goo like an oyster, which apparently means I'm the master, and it told me all sorts of things about how I could build flat pack furniture that's meant to take multiple people and do it all by myself, or predict scores from various games, or in fact, my favorite, become an intelligence analyst, which I'm sure I'd be perfectly suited for. What about you, Isa?
Mine was I eat it in 2 mouthfuls. I just don't like wasting time with my chocolate. So it goes straight in. And that apparently means I love a good solution, which is absolutely true. I say it like it is. And apparently I should be looking for a job as I think it was like an aerospace engineer or something along the lines.
Oh, well, you are pretty
so maybe
smart.
I'm in the wrong industry.
Yeah, pretty smart, like a solution that makes complete sense. But I am quite disappointed that you try and eat the chocolate as quickly as possible, because I like to make sure that mine lasts for as long as possible, which probably informs how I eat a cream egg. Anyway.
It's just too good. I think I'm just an impatient person, and that reflects.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so cool. We've obviously talked a little bit about our reflections and a bit of fun that we've had with the campaign, but what about consumers? What can we see? How have they responded to the ad, Isa?
So I think it makes sense for us to go straight to the platform then for us to have a look at that.
Oh, excellent. So what we're seeing here is the results overall of the ad. But first of all, let's just focus a little bit on what those measures actually are. So what we can see is we've got the sales impact score here, which is the ability of the ad to drive short-term sales effects for the brand. And I'll let Isa talk about what that 84 means in a minute. And on the other side, we've got the brand impact score, which is a score that reflects whether the advertising has the potential to build the brand into the future. So driving lasting effects and driving long-term sales and equity growth. So it looks like it's done well, Isa. How have people responded?
It has done very well. So in the 84 and the 76 are essentially a percentile. So it essentially shows where the ad sits out of every ad we've tested. In this case, in the UK. So we tested the ad in the UK. It's obviously part of a category. We can look at a category norm separately, but in this case, we're basing it at a total country norm. So against all ads that we've tested in the UK, it sits within the top 16% when it comes to driving the potential of driving immediate sales, and in the top like 25% when it comes to driving that longer term sales impact and brand equity. And then obviously there's a lot of measures, the individual measures that feed into that percentile score. We can see people who have watched the ad till the end, how distinctive it feels when it comes to the sales impact, how likely people are to want to purchase the brand after seeing the ad. And when it comes to brand impact, we've got measures like the unaided brand recall. So how likely are people to remember the brand unaided after seeing the ad, in the context of a reel of ads as well, whether how strongly they feel towards the ad in terms of emotions, how much they love it, how much they've laughed throughout it, how much they like the brand, etc.
I was just going to say, I mean, the results look really great. Looks like it's got great potential to be noticed, to cut through, and for people to really pay attention to it, which is fantastic. You obviously said that we were comparing to a total country norm, which is great because, of course, advertising competes with everything to be noticed and remembered, and certainly competes with all other advertising. So it's important that, you know, it reaches people in that context. However, we obviously know that when it comes to chocolate and when it comes to confectionery, the advertising tends to be even stronger. You know, people love those categories. Things are delicious. You can show product consumption and all those wonderful things. So is there a way of knowing how good it is amongst chocolate and confectionery ads, not just amongst everything?
Yeah, definitely. Every time we configure an ad, we can toggle our norm to reflect how it performs versus the total country versus kind of like a wider universe with that the category sits in. So for example, chocolate would sit in food, and then you can really narrow into how it performs amongst like its most relevant universe, essentially, which is the category itself on chocolate. So we've got a nice little toggle here that we can go on to food, chocolate candy. So I guess before we go into that, we can see that against a country norm, there's quite a lot of green in there, which is essentially a significantly better score than the norm. A lot of scores in line with the norm, which is that yellow, no red, which is significantly under the norm. When we flick to how it performs versus a chocolate norm, we can see how the results might differ as well, particularly those percentiles and then the individual scores. So we see that actually the percentiles have dropped a little bit, but they still sit, the ad still sits in the top third of those ads that we've tested within the chocolate category in the UK. And we start seeing some red as well. So we see that overall emotion has actually dipped under the norm when it comes to chocolate. And we see there that the brand meets needs as well has dipped a little bit significantly under the norm. From an emotional perspective, it's quite interesting, and we might get into it in a bit more detail, showing you some other data on our platform, but chocolate ads tend to elicit quite a strong love reaction.
Right.
And this one, it does it, I guess it's quite different, and that comes through in the distinctive measures for the ad, but it elicits quite a lot of humor. So it outperforms in driving that laughter from the audience, but slightly underperforms when it comes to driving that love that the consumers really feel when they see a chocolate ad. So versus that country norm, that love reaction is still there, and it's still very much in line with the norm. But when it comes to the chocolate category, it's actually under, and that's where we see the overall emotion dipping there.
I mean, that makes sense. And I guess given that people have stuck around and watched the ad, it's clearly engaged them
Yeah.
a lot. And they've clearly taken out the brand for many reasons that I think are fairly obvious around the logo, the product consumption, the bright colors, the how do you eat yours? I mean, obviously, if you're as old as me and remember that slogan from 20 years ago and the first time around. But I think what's quite nice here is it's not always a bad thing to elicit a different emotion to the rest of the category. So the rest of the category is playing on a love emotion. Here we're playing on laughter, and the brand is kind of quirkier and that little bit more distinctive, right? So in many ways that's in keeping with what we might expect.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely makes the ad stand out versus everything else. And when you think of Cadbury as a parent brand as well, they've got so many sub brands that they need to differentiate versus each other as much as they're differentiating themselves versus the rest of the category, that it feels right for them to approach Creme Egg in this humorous way, eliciting laughter, captivating people with kind of like you said, a very quirky narrative. So it's definitely not a negative in this case, because you've got quite a lot of positives balancing that out elsewhere.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about it being distinctive and differentiating. Is there any more insight we can get around that?
Yeah, we can go to another of our charts that focus specifically on the differentiation metrics. So if we go on to our scale-based reach metrics chart here, so if we look at the scale-based reach metrics, we can see things like ad distinctiveness, brand distinctiveness significantly higher than the norm, outperforming that, like the standard for an ad in the UK. And when it comes to uniqueness of brand impressions, it's performing really well as well. When we talk about uniqueness of brand impressions, it's essentially how unique to the particular brand the ad is. So it's a scale from the ad could be for any brand to the ad could only be for this brand, and in this case, Cadbury Creme Egg. So I think when we looked at the individual responses, 40% of our respondents had said that it could only be for Cadbury Creme Egg, which is quite high, and again is above the norm that we see within
Nice.
the UK.
So the route they've taken is kind of distinctive and highly ownable, which
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense for a particular point in the year for a brand with such character, and standing out, you know, like you mentioned, across the whole kind of portfolio. So you mentioned a little bit about the humor. We talked a little bit about it being humorous and distinctive rather than being one that creates a sense of love. Can we dive into that a bit more? What is it, the humor that people like, or is it something else?
Yeah, we can have a look at the likes and how they're split across themes. So how much of what people like is attributed to the actual emotion of the ad versus something else like the storyline or the characters. So we can actually see here that 28% of people's likes were attributed to the fun aspect of the ad, the humor it elicited. We've got quite a bit of characters, like character enjoyment there, the style of the ad, which also plays a bit into the humorous element, because they tie together in terms of how the story is told, the scenarios in general, but humor is definitely the thing that's coming out as most prominent when it comes to those likes. And we can go straight into it and expand what people are saying. The examples of how the lady eating the egg lived her life were funny and inspiring. It seemed like an advert that could make anyone feel they can eat Cadbury's Creme Egg, which is nice. I like that the ad was a bit quirky and different. The humorous moments were enjoyable, and it made me interested to find out what my Creme Egg personality is. So I guess even beyond eliciting that humor, it sparked a curiosity in the viewer to really try to find out who they were based on how they ate their Creme Eggs, which is exactly what we ended up doing. Yeah, that's definitely coming through quite a lot. We can also expand to other areas of what people liked. If we go on to the style, maybe on the interesting or attention grabbing. It was amusing, keeps your attention, promotes individuality, and also how a brand is for everyone. So also that message is coming through really clearly there. And that's making people like the ad even more.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. We'll maybe come on to talk about that a little bit in terms of various brands that have tried to establish rituals. But I guess what's kind of clever here is they've recognized that that everyone has a ritual related to Cadbury Cream Egg, but also that everyone's ritual is different. So there is a ritual associated with eating that thing, but people can choose their own way, which is kind of clever and kind of nice. So we just talked there a little bit about how it works for everyone in terms of that kind of individual way of experiencing it. Does the ad work for everyone? Does it work to recruit new users? Does it work to make, I guess, existing users be reminded of Cadbury Cream Egg at this kind of key window in the heading into Easter moment? Or
yeah, I think it's quite interesting when we looked particularly at the resonance metrics. So how much people resonated with the ad, how much people enjoyed the ad. The scores were significantly higher for those who are regular eaters of Cadbury Cream Eggs. So we can have a look at those quickly. The purchase metrics as well. So when we looked at purchase uplift, again, that was significantly higher for the guys who are more likely to interact with the brand at a more regular basis.
nice.
But just to see, I guess, like the stark difference between the total sample and the regular Cadbury Cream Egg users. This is the total respondent scores for enjoyment, relevance, brand meets needs, understanding new information. You can see that mostly there's some directionally above the norm, slightly under the norm, significantly under on new information at a total level. But actually, when we filter down to people who eat cream eggs at least once a month, which we can also get through. Nice question here of how often do you typically eat Cadbury Cream Egg? You can select the frequency at which they do so. You could see all of those measures suddenly turning into the green. Extremely high enjoyment, very high relevance. They obviously understand the ad because they can relate to it. It feels very directed to them. It's speaking directly to the consumer, and that is highly appreciated when it comes to the overall enjoyment of the ad.
I mean, this reflects me very much because I'm a massive cream egg fan. Like Boxing Day, all the Christmas chocolate goes out, and of course you see the Easter products arriving already, and I'm straight in there to get my cream egg. I guess what's interesting for me looking at this and having looked at loads of ads, of course, we always see these metrics to be higher amongst brand users, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
They love the brand, they feel positive about the brand, therefore they notice things from the brand as well, and generally have that good feeling. But this is quite extreme, so it's definitely really reinforcing their experience and their enjoyment of Cadbury Cream Egg, which I guess for a product that's only around for a few months of the year, that's kind of really great to reawaken that it's time to move to cream egg from their normal chocolate from the rest of the year and start consuming that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Isa. So I guess there's some little facts about the ad, but what kind of learnings can we take away from this? What is it that this ad did really well that could apply to other ads? Now, one of the things you've talked about is the humor, and taking people on that journey and making them feel something across the whole ad, so that more than we'd expect watch the ad right through to the end rather than skipping it. There seems to be a learning in there in terms of an emotional journey and keeping that engagement.
Yeah, and we can see how people reacted to the ad with our emotional trace as well. The different emotions that they felt second by second watching the ad, and which scenes in the ad might have elicited a bit more of like a spike in that emotional journey. So if we focus on the positive emotions, we can select love, like, laughter.
Nice. I mean, even before you put that filter in, I could already see that it was spikier than some ads you see where it's much more like, I quite like it, and then it just carries on. There's some definite peak moments here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see the laughter peaks in the pink kind of throughout. And at the end, a love peak when the brand comes through, and we can play the ad so you can see exactly those moments where it
The way you eat a
happens.
cream egg says everything about you. Heather likes to nibble hers whilst maintaining eye contact.
So obviously the guy
That means she's
cringing
kind
at
of a big
her,
deal.
watching
She
him.
orders for the table.
We'll have the lobster.
Oh, she's always the better half of a couple's costume.
Giddy up.
Plays rock every time and doesn't care what the lyrics are. Search Cream Egg Test to find out who you really are. How do you eat yours?
Nice. So that makes complete sense. It's a lovely learning there. If you want people to stick with you throughout the whole ad, you need to have key moments that keep people with the journey. And it can be a narrative arc, or in this case, because you're using humor, it's making sure that there's enough peak moments in that humor to keep people engaged right the way through.
Definitely.
That's great. I think another takeaway, and probably this one's less for what we're going to see in the platform, but it's something we've seen across lots of different brands, right? And it's actually partly what interested us in having a look at this particular campaign. It's a multi-channel campaign. Obviously, it's brought back a slogan from 20 years ago. But to me, what makes it super clever is it plays on product consumption. And we've seen a lot of brands do that over the years, right? And it seems to be that when you can do that, and when you have a true consumer insight around what makes that consumption unique for your brand, that it seems to be quite powerful. So we just brought in some examples here, but the Oreo's got its twist and its dunk, which we've got there. And even in the most recent Super Bowl ad, they've taken it a step further, right? So that the twisting of the Oreo, depending on which side the cream ended up, obviously helped you make your decision, a bit like rock, paper, scissors, or whatever other game you might want to play to make decisions. But kind of bringing that product ritual of the twist, the lick, the dunk has worked really well for Oreo. There was also this other ad that we remembered when we were reflecting on something being unique about the product consumption. So the Cheetos brand obviously leaves this orange dust on your fingers when you eat it, and that could be seen, I guess, potentially as something negative, but they turned it into something funny and positive and ownable by the brand. And they had that in their ad, which won a Creative Effectiveness Award, Creative Strategy Award at Cannes, and did really well during the Super Bowl as well, where they had MC Hammer, "You can't touch this." And it was making the point that when you've covered your fingers in orange dust because you've been eating your Cheetos, then you couldn't possibly help with all the work that's to be done. So a really clever product truth that's been turned into something, I guess, humorous and resonant. Guinness, that this is one of the ones I love, like, good things come to those who wait. That's a real product truth. And they've created, I guess, positivity again, that like the wait is great because you can build that anticipation and then you can really enjoy the pint that comes. Heinz, again, it could be seen as a bit of waiting, but it's the fact that, you know, that anticipation, and you've got to get the angle just right to get the ketchup out. So again, recognizing that there's something in the product consumption, in this case, actually serving the product, that's quite different and quite powerful to other brands. And then I think this was the one that you've reflected on and spent a bit of time thinking about, the Muller corner. That's got a bit of a ritual to it as well, right?
Yeah. Last year we looked at Muller's new campaign. It was almost like a total new way of positioning the overall Muller portfolio. After a number of years of very different messaging, and it was all around consumption occasion. So it wasn't just corners. They had an ad for Muller rice, they had an ad for Muller fridge, but the corners one, they played on the fact that people might feel self-conscious about licking the lid, but it's something that everyone does, and everyone can relate to. With rice, they had a divided family of whether you eat Muller rice warm in the microwave or you eat it just straight out of the fridge.
Nice.
And obviously then with Mother Fridge, it was about kind of almost like licking the last drop of it, because it's so good. But yeah, all those things that I guess like very, very relatable, and bring the consumer in straight away. It's almost a distinctive brand asset in itself, the actual way of consumption.
Yeah, it's quite clever because it's ownable, right? And it's
Yeah.
distinctive, it stands out. It's resonant because it's based on an insight about how their product is consumed. And when you execute around it, you can have some fun with it, but also your brand's always going to be very present, which is something I guess some ads do struggle with, which is giving a role to a brand within the really compelling story that we have. I
Yeah.
guess to finish on the rituals, and we mentioned this earlier, but the Cadbury Cream Egg one, the difference between it to some degree and some of the others is acknowledging that people have a ritual, but allowing that ritual to be different by each individual rather than one that everyone uses. So the same, but also a wee bit different, and definitely some learning there. So I guess that brings us to the end of learning about Cadbury and learning about how consumers responded to it. I guess the one reflection probably to leave people with, and the one thing to take away from the ad is whether really have you thought about whether there might be an insight around the way that your product is consumed or the way it's used, something that is inherently true but could also be surprising if people haven't had their attention drawn to it, that could provide a foundation for like another really engaging campaign like the one we're seeing here.
Yeah, and I think also fundamentally, is that consumption occasion or that eating experience different to the rest of the category, which is exactly what Creme Egg has done here. It's really kind of stepped away from the rest of the chocolate category and communicated in a really unique way, all based on how consumers actually eat the product.
Yeah, it's spot on. There's certainly no way I could eat any other chocolate bar how I eat a Cadbury Cream Egg. So they've definitely struck on something there. Thank you, Isa, for your time and for taking us through all of the insights here. Super
Thank
useful,
you.
and look forward to chatting again next week.
Yeah, look forward to that too.